Hello, my name is Rich Howard, owner of Architectural Builder Supply. In this video is to bring you a closer look at the Schlage F51A PLY 605. The F-Series Schlage locks have been around for sure since the 1980s, possibly the 1970s. I've not checked my vintage 1970 and 80s catalogs to see when I can pinpoint its first appearance, but it's for sure in that realm of time. The F-Series lock is Schlage's standard duty residential lock. You would certainly also call it light duty commercial. Would be appropriate to call it that. It is a grade 2 lock and has evolved significantly over the last several years. In terms of marginally because of its design, but primarily it's evolved in terms of the very currently broad availability of trim designs. Schlage used to make, back in 1990 when I first started in this industry, it was Bell. In an F-Series, you would get the Bell, you would get the Orbit, you would get the Georgian, you would get the Plymouth. I think you would have done a Levon lever as well. You could get a keyed function in a Levon where the lever was on the inside only. But other than that, that was it. Those were your choices. Bell, which was the Tulip in the A-Series. The Bell, the Orbit, the Georgian, the Plymouth. I don't think there were any other options then, and the Levon. And the Levon may have been a little bit later. But today, there's a lot of options. And that's a really good thing. When I say a lot, I mean 15 levers alone that you can put onto 3 different roses, at least, if not more. You know what? Also, and then there were the levers, flare and jazz was available back then. It wasn't just those knobs. Flare and jazz. Oh, and the Elan. The Elan was a common lever. It was like the Levon, but it was a little bit larger. Accent came into onto the market at some point at that time as well. But now there's a lot more than just 3 roses. There might be 10 roses. And that's really great because, why? Well, people want options. They don't want, if you're doing antique brass, you're getting a Georgian knob. If you're doing polished chrome, you're getting an Orbit knob, that sort of business. If you want the cheap one, use the Bell. That's the least expensive. So the bottom line is, I'm not going to jump into all the different designs because you can easily search that online. This video is really to more talk about why the F-Series I think is important and why you should consider it. I have been working with the F-Series lock for all these years, and it is a great caliber lock in the sense that it's noticeably more expensive than who it really competes against, in the sense of your Quicksets, your Dexters, your anything you can get at a home center. It's certainly competing against that stuff. But the Schlage residential lock fits within the space between what I would call the low end, where cost really drives decisions. Except that I do like Quickset because I think they do a really great job at the quality that they give you, the options they give you, and where it's priced. So that combination is very potent because the value is very high. And Quickset also is a company that actually has a strong background, in my opinion, in the realm of locksmithing. They've done a lot of really good development when it comes to their smart key technology, their construction keying. So they've tried to really accommodate the market. But when you want something that's going to be of higher caliber, both in brand recognition and in quality, back in the old days, you would jump up to a Baldwin. Well, that's a huge jump, because back in the old days, it was only the estate. There was no images. The lower end, not lower end because it's all good, but the builder option Baldwin, and then the influx of all these other imports, your Ashley Nortons, your Valley, your MTECs, your Omnias. So Schlage sits right in that position where I don't want the least expensive stuff, and you know what, the most expensive, my client just, you know, isn't going to pay for it. But I want something really good, and I'm willing to pay for really good. And that's where the Schlage F-Series really nails it at all times. I have sold these locks to clients. I know that 30 years later, they are still happily installed and working like day one. And what's interesting is the only thing that you'll really see that will happen is parts will need to be replaced because someone literally vandalized it or broke it or damaged it. I have seen trim so worn with use that the plating, whether it be satin chrome or brass, is completely worn off just with use, exposing the brass underneath of the knob. The locks are easy to work on. They're easy to key. We've done some locksmithing on this job. So this lock is 4AA. It's the fourth change key under the AA master. This client's project has 5 apartments where we've done front door, back door. They're all keyed differently, master keyed, and then there are 13 cylinders, mortar cylinders, that are all keyed differently. So we're able to do all that keying in-house. Easy to work on, super simple. When you're putting this together, you know, what we used to do is just kind of rotate that till it fell in place. But the only thing you kind of got to do is just manipulate the inside button, and it all falls together because you've got your hub and then your spindle. These posts with the tapped holes fit right into this area here where your screws are going to go through. Okay, nothing to work on in here at all. There's nothing for you to touch, nothing to worry about. Your key's going to go in, you're going to rotate it 90 degrees. Your pin wrench, that's what that's called, will depress that tab, and you have to have the key in and turned in order for that to work. That'll come right off. Pull your cylinder out. You're going to be careful when you move the cylinder out of the knob because the cover of the Bible of the cylinder, where the springs and the driver pins are located, needs to be slightly depressed to come out over the stem of the knob. So you're going to do what I did there in the sense of have 2 fingers on it, and then kind of I'm biasing the face of the cylinder and tipping it down a little bit so I can get that to slide out. And you want to be careful. You want to control that. That's on there. If you abuse it, it'll come apart, of course, but it's not going to come apart. At that point, you've got a single C-clip on the back, and then you can rekey the lock. So it's self-contained. It's really durable. It's made of zinc, but it's made to good machining tolerances, meaning you are certainly not going to master key these using in my opinion, a master wafer less than 30 thousandths. 27 thousandths would probably work, but it's known that at 30 thousandths, I've used 27 thousandths, but that is a risky gamble. I would not go below 30 thousandths. It is known that 23 thousandths is where you can count on having failure. But at 30 thousandths, I've never had a failure of a master wafer being too thin. Okay, so it's really a great cylinder in that regard. And sure, quickset is good too, but taking this apart is a lot easier than, and it's not difficult taking a quickset, 400 apart. But you don't need a pickle fork to take this apart. You do need a pin wrench, but you can also use, if you've got a sturdy thumbnail, you can also use that. Okay, so we've demonstrated how easy it is to take the lock apart. Repinning it is elementary, not part of this video. If you're a locksmith doing that sort of service, putting it back together is equally easy. Cylinder goes back in, keys go in because they make a nice handle. I've got my spring-loaded tab here, and I'm going to hold it facing me. I'm going to get my knob pushed down to the tab. I'm going to push the tab down with my thumb. I'm going to get it pushed down a little further, rotate my key, it snaps on, I'm locked in place. It's done. It's a done deal. Great lock. Okay, now let's take a look. Now, finishes. Obviously, lots of finishes. Back in the old days, it was just some pretty common type finishes. Your brass, satin, polished brass, polished chrome, satin chrome, satin bronze in most of it. You couldn't get a satin bronze in a Georgian, but you can get an antique brass in a Georgian. That may have been it initially. Nowadays, you've got lots of finishes. 505 for lifetime brass, 605 for bright brass, 608 for satin brass. Satin brass is 606, so I'm not sure what they're doing with a 608 finish. That a 608 finish I'm not familiar with. Let's see if we can take a quick look at 608. There is a link in our website, the upper right-hand corner, to contact us. And then on the left side, look for Video Gallery. Go to page 2 of that document, at least currently, and then search for BHMA finish chart. They do show a 608, oxidized satin brass, relieved clear coated. It's going to be like a satin antique brass, is what I would say. I've never seen 608 finish, but I would say it's going to be a bit darker than satin brass and not as dark as antique brass. Now, back to the finishes. 609 antique brass, 613 oil rub bronze, 618 polished nickel, 619 satin nickel, 620 antique pewter, they call it, but we would call that antique nickel. 621 is a distressed nickel, 622 matte black, 625 bright chrome, 626 satin chrome, 716 aged bronze. So a explosive availability of finishes. The bottom line is if you can't get it in a Schlage F series, you probably don't want it to begin with. So what they've done is taken that segment that I define, in my opinion, and they really own it. Quicksets are great locks and all that other stuff. The Schlage lock is better. The downside of it is that as the graph goes of value or utility, the Schlage falls off only because the price is noticeably more expensive. And it just depends on what your job is and what your personal opinion is on the cost of locks and what they should cost. If you're a home builder, you might have the opinion back in the early 90s, the Irish fellas that were building 3-flats, they would only use Schlage because in their mind they took pride in the lock that they would put in. They could go anywhere and get the low-end locks put in, their client base. But they were putting in Schlage exclusively. They weren't putting in A-line because they would say, that's too good. That's better than the locks I have on me own house. But they would always reside in that area with that good quality lock. So from your perspective, you have to decide what's the total cost to do your project in an F-Series versus other options. If you really want to go beyond that, I like the A-Series because that's an entirely higher caliber lock in its totality. So lots of options, easy to work on. Super easy to install, could not be easier, realistically. You are going to get, this block is packaged with the part numbers that are shown on here. I think that's a 16081, 16086 latch, and then a 10027 strike. So a 16086 latch is going to be this radius corner. And you can order the latch and strike combinations to suit. You could pop off that radius corner and turn it into a drive-in latch, and you would literally rotate. You see these two slots here and then right there. You can rotate this to where you can pull that off and then insert the drive-in latch face to it if you're doing just a drive-in style. This has fallen in quality, that's for sure. That's not the same piece of solid brass strike that I was once used to. You can tell that's not solid brass. That's a shame. And the face of the latch bolt, they've cheapened that up, unfortunately. That's certainly not polished brass. Back in the old days, that piece was definitely solid brass. Okay, don't love that. That is a D-strike. You can use your imagination and see why we would call it that. It's a 1/4-inch radius. They're both 1/4-inch radius, and that's achieved when the router, the 2-flute carbide 1/2-inch diameter router, is racing through. in the manufacturing process, leaving 1/4 inch radius. If you didn't go back and square corner or square out the corners, this is what you'd be looking for. Your screw package, that's super simple. You get 6 screws. That's all you're going to need. 2 for the strike, 2 for the latch, 2 for the lock body. Super simple. That's it. Your pin wrench, keep those. Those are awfully nice to have. Now, there is a definition. This is called a tubular lock, and that's because the design of the lock is such that the lock not only installs in what's called a tube through the door, but the mechanism drives through the latch bolt. So I know that locks are described as tubular when the mechanism, the driving mechanism, resides within or through the latch bolt. Cylindrical locks are different in that the latch bolt connects to the outside hub of the lock, but this is what's called a tubular lock. Okay? Tubular locks are associated with standard duty or light duty construction. I can't think of a tubular grade 1 lock. I don't believe they exist. So you're going to see this type of construction in a standard duty residential type lock. Easily adjustable back set. You don't have to do nothing. You'll notice that there is a slot here and here, here and here. You're going to slide your latch bolt either to 2 3/8 or 2 3/4. And you're then just going to slide it over the hub of the lock. 2 3/8, bring it over here to 2 3/4. Okay, super simple. Great construction. This design really keeps the latch bolt from any sort of moving, because over time you're putting force on this, and now with the levers that are available, even more force is going to be applied where that latch bolt can get worked, but it's locked into this zinc hub that they have here. So that's why it's called tubular. Then, of course, your knob just is going to go on. You're going to probably have to rotate that button a little bit, and it just fits right on. You're done. 2 screws, walk away. You're finished. Could not be easier. What's nice about it is that it's a generous size handle. What's nice about it is that the springs inside of here they feel as if they're sturdy and durable. They give a nice snapping power in both directions, where you feel like you've got a lock that's in your hand that was worthy of the price. Now, the installation aspect of it, and there is a link below this video to the installation instructions and the template. The template you would literally, tape or apply to the edge of your door and mark your 2 3/8 or your 2 3/4 hole. Then you can also mark the edge of the door, whether it is going to be 1 3/8 or 1 3/4 thick. Okay, you're just going to take your center punch, bam, right in the side of the door. Go to the other side, do that as well. The paper template is nice because you don't have to measure anything. If you have a beveled door and you just try to measure 2 3/8 or 2 3/4, be mindful that a beveled door, and you put the tape measure on one side to 2 3/4, or on the inside, or pardon me, the small side, which is probably the push side of the door, or the exterior if the door swings in. If you've got a beveled door, that dimension you're going to get is going to be different, because the back set's measured from the center of the thickness of the door to the dimension 2 3/8 or 2 3/4. So be mindful of that. Using the template's really great. I've drilled doors with every possible tool, whether it be something that costs $50,000 and it's a big machine that uses a router bit. I've used Forstner type bits. I've used flat bottomed cutters with outside wing scoring feature to it. I've used, of course, hole saws. I've used multi-spur bits. I've used dial saws. A 2 1/8 hole saw is the one that I would use over and over again. The only downside of it is that you have to, that core is going to break off inside the door. And what's nice about a hole saw is if you're using a bimetal hole saw, which you would be, if you get a light gauge steel door, it's all going to be good. If you get your regular wood door, it's all going to be good. What I like to do is run it backwards a little bit and score the face of the veneer so I don't tear, and then I proceed. And a hole saw is nice because it's flat bottomed, in the sense that when you hit the door, you're going to know immediately if you're drilling straight or not, because you'll notice that the circumference of the bit has not hit simultaneously. Multi-spur bits, in my opinion, should be avoided. I've seen damage. Someone took their multi-spur bit and just started running it into the door. Sure enough, they tore out about a 3-inch length of the luan of the door. Not much to be able to do there except put a scar plate onto the door. The Schlage had a flat-bottomed cutter with a wing, and that was good. The issue with it, though, is that, well, they discontinued them, and getting good quality sharpening service was a problem, so I just went to hole saws. They're cheap, they're effective, they're reliable, etc. You're going to need a 2 1/8 inch hole through the door. You're going to need a prep in the edge of the door. Depending on your latch bolt, I think I would do a 15/16 overall. You could do a 1 inch on the bore, but you don't need a 1 inch. And actually, I think what you need is a 7/8. Let's see if it's called out. Yeah, it's 7/8 or 1 inch. So a 7/8 would be appropriate for here. You could do a 15/16. You can also do 1 inch, but the width of that is 1 inch. And if you do 1 inch, you're probably going to see a little radius on one or both sides. 7/8 is good, but you got to drill it correct. You know, it's got to be in the right place. 15/16 gives you that small amount of whoopsie, because when you put the wing, the fly bit, that's what I would always use, because they're cheap and they're effective and they do the job well. I would always do the 2 1/8 first, and then I would bring my crossbore. I would bring my edge bore, not my crossbore, my edge bore down, because now you're just drilling through a couple of inches of wood. When you place the bit down, depending on how it hits the grain structure of the wood, it might move just a tiny bit. So that 15/16 would allow me to compensate. But in no way would I really ever exceed the width of this faceplate, okay? If you're going to do the drive-in, then you need a 1 inch. That drive-in is going to require a 1 inch prep. Could not be easier. If you're going to do a single lock installation, you know, the home centers have those quick lock install kits. They're not very expensive. They're basically disposable, in my opinion. But they would certainly get you by for a lock. So looking at the installation instructions, they're telling us that 2 1/8 hole at 2 3/8 or 2 3/4, 7/8 in the edge bore, or a 1 inch if you're doing an RFL round face latch. Step 2 is make any modifications that you need to the latch bolt, otherwise have at it. Step 3, Step 3 shows that hub that would be if you ordered a UL lock. A UL lock is not common because people don't order UL locks, meaning the lock has been tested and found to pass the duress of a fire test, a fire procedure. That piece of metal that's shown in step 3 is mandatory if you are installing a UL lock onto a lock onto a fire-rated door, which will then require it be a listed and or labeled product. You need that extra piece of hardware. It was tested that way. The instructions say that you have to have it, so therefore, that's why you have to have it. If you're doing a fire-rated door, you need to be ordering UL versions of your locks. Your latch bolt is going to go in. They do show how you're going to tap the RFL in. Yeah, be mindful of that. You know, don't, put your block of wood, depress the latch, hold it depressed, and then take your mallet and just carefully tap it down, and it will work. Step 5, if you need to remove the trim, I've demonstrated that. Step 6, I've demonstrated how to put it together. 7, if you're doing a lever trim and you've got a spare, your rose and your lever are separate, you'll clip it on as it's shown. I'm doing a knob. If you have to remove that keyed function for whatever reason, I've demonstrated that. Couldn't be easier. So at the end of the day, hopefully I've expressed my opinion that I am very partial to the Schlage F-Series lock. I would choose to use it personally in the sense that I don't think that I've ever used it personally because I'm in the lock business. If it's a personal project, I'm going to be using an A-line or a D-line lock. But I would not hesitate to use the F-line, and I applaud those who build homes and use the F-line lock because they have choices. They can choose to use a less expensive lock. But I would like to think that Schlage, that the caliber of the lock and the caliber of the company And the fact that Walter R. Schlage invented the cylinder lock, placing the cylinder within the trim itself, means and is worth something. I like working on them. They're easy to work on. They're predictable. They're reliable. Finally, there's a link below this video to the manufacturer's page within our website where you can pull up not only all of the Schlage products that we sell, but also a link to the manufacturer's product catalogs are there. Not only the current product catalog, but the residential product catalog. Do a search on that page for residential, and then you're going to see the overwhelming amount of options. And that's a good thing. However, it might be just simply too many. I've had people that have called up and said, I need a house full of latitude lever. Those look nice. But you'll also notice that certain levers or certain knobs are more conducive to a specific finish. Like a Georgian is going to be antique brass. Or polished chrome. You'll see polished chrome Georgian, like in a split finish on a bathroom. Polished brass, polished chrome. But you know, you don't really see an accent lever in, well, accent you'd see in everything. The point I'm trying to make is these levers may be more conducive to a particular finish that you have in mind. You know, the flare lever, flare, okay. So that's a good example. Something more traditional in its design. Are you going to see those in satin chrome? That's pretty uncommon to see a flare in satin chrome, although they do make those, or they did. But you'll sure see it in polished brass all the time. That curved handle and polished brass, that all goes together. So that's the point I'm driving at. The grip handles that are there, the Addison style, that would be great in polished chrome. But I don't know that the Brookshire, which is a bit more ornate, would you do that in polished chrome? So maybe you would. I probably wouldn't. The Camelot, that would be great in your antique or your oil rubbed. But would you see it in a satin chrome? You might. The Wakefield, the Plymouth is the Plymouth, the Century. The Plymouth and the Century are the two that harken back to those days in the early 90s and 80s. I think they also had a Parthenon back then, and that's a great example. Ornate, you wouldn't have seen that in polished chrome. They didn't even offer it. You would have gotten that in antique brass. I'm partial to Schlage. It's because of their quality of their product, but the quality of their technical support is phenomenal. Absolutely. Every time I ask a question of their technical support, I get an answer. One other thing, speaking of them, oh my gosh, so sorry. A very important distinction on this lock. This is an F51A. In the old days it was F51. Well, now it's an A. Here's why. This lock is in the locked position. It's always unlocked on the inside. Oh, wait. It is, this is what the A means. In the old days, you're always unlocked. You can always exit. On the exterior, if you set that button, it's locked. You come with the key, you put it in, go inside, close the door, it's locked. Until you do this, it's locked. The A, however, is now different in the sense that every single time you put that key in, you turn it, it's unlocked. Watch the button as I turn the key. Rotating it back the other way will automatically relock it. I can take it out and it's automatically relocked. So what you have to be mindful is, like I like to think of it this way. What type of locks were in the house that you grew up in? Mine were always locked. So we always knew that when we left the house and if you pulled the door closed, they were locked. Other people always had to relock their door when they left. So what you would do in this case is you would either make sure that you are turning that button so it's horizontal, or when you come in, you enter, open the door, turn the key back 180 degrees, then take it out, then close the door, and you're relocked. Because that action of going back in the opposite direction is relocking this. The point of that is to be mindful of the function of the lock, because that's how this actually works. It doesn't work like it used to. It used to stay locked on the outside without having to do anything. Without having to turn that button to relock it. I don't know why they made that change. I guess it would be probably because, in my experience, the majority of people are accustomed to being attentive to the condition of the lock. Is it locked or unlocked every single time? Where my upbringing was taking it for granted that it was always locked. And when you walked out and if you happened to leave your keys inside and you looked at the door and it was closed, you knew you were locked out just because that door was closed. Anyway, any questions on the F51A or any other F-Series lock or any Schlage lock at all? My name is Rich Howard. Thank you very much.